As we now resume and start officially with your revised penal code. As you will note, revised penal code is the repository, basically the repository of our penal statute. It was a translation, actually. This is originally the Spanish Penal Code, revised by a group of people who were commissioned to compile and incorporate different penal laws then existing, and then interpret that Spanish language to English language. Hence, in the interpretation of your revised penal code, the Supreme Court would go back to the original text to determine what really is the correct interpretation or construction of a certain provision. As you will note later on, or as you will note in some provisions of the code, the Supreme Court would modify its application because the original text was translated wrongfully. For instance, in paragraph 5 of Article 13, you know that vindication of a grave offense, immediate vindication of the grave offense. The original text is proxima, not immediate. What is the difference if it was proxima and not immediate? The issue of lapse of time. If it is proximate vindication of a grave offense compared to immediate vindication of a grave offense, notice, class, that even if the crime was committed in vindication of a grave offense after a lapse of time, that will still be allowed because the original text is proxima. Unlike if you will sustain that word immediate under paragraph 5, then that lapse of time will not allow the offender to avail of such mitigating circumstances. Article 3 provides felonies. Speaking of felonies, class, that is a technical term, which, if mentioned under your revised penal code, would refer to those acts or omission punishable under the revised penal code. It is not the same as a crime or an offense. Offense strictly would refer to a special law, violation of a special law. Unlike a crime, the word crime would basically include both a felony and that of an offense. Notice your revised penal code. While it is referring to a felony, there are provisions that mention about crime, but that should refer to a felony. In other words, it interchanged the word crime with that of a felony. For instance, under Article 14, when the crime is committed with treachery, when the crime is committed with evident premeditation, it did not use the word felony, but it is referring to a felony. But the most important thing that you should remember is, if the word felony is used by the revised penal code, effectively it must refer to an act or omission punishable under the revised penal code. For instance, look at your Article 160 of your revised penal code, mentioning about quasi-recidivism. And it mentioned the commission of a felony while serving sentence or before serving sentence, the commission of a felony. So, that second crime committed should be a felony. Unlike the first crime, to constitute quasi-recidivism, it does not need to be a felony, whether it be a violation of a special law, illegal possession of a firearm, whatever is that crime in which the accused is serving sentence, so long as the subsequent crime is a felony, he becomes a quasi-recidivist. Felony may either be dolo or culpa. And the only difference, class, between dolo and culpa is the intent and the negligence or the imprudence. That is the only difference. Because in both instances, whether it be dolo or culpa, it will still include the matter of intelligence and that of freedom. Intelligence and freedom. They are the same. This is the only distinction. And in Eibler versus San Pedro, the Supreme Court clarified that reckless imprudence is a crime in itself. So that if it is a crime in itself, the felony is reckless imprudence. It is not homicide, it is not estafa, but it is reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. As a rule, reckless imprudence resulting in parricide. Kaya, that is the proper term that should be used. Although there are still instances when we mention There are, even in the matter of complex crime, in Eibler versus San Pedro, the Supreme Court also said that this reckless imprudence is not subject to the provisions of Article 48. Because what is involved is the mind of the accused. It is the negligence or imprudence. And what is penalized class, or what determines the penalty, is the resulting crime. Kaya nga, reckless imprudence resulting in homicide, that is the basis of the penalty. Since it involves the mind, such imprudence may be reckless or simple, dependent upon the circumstances as defined under Article 365. If I were you, I will also memorize what is the distinction between simple imprudence and the reckless imprudence, which is defined under Article 365. Note that the modifying circumstances in culpa, modifying, is either simple or reckless in character. This is not modified by Article 13, 14, or 15 involving mitigating and aggravating circumstances. It is only dolo which is affected by 13, 14, and 15 because the greater or lesser perversity will involve the intent of the accused. The negligence or imprudence does not involve greater or lesser perversity. So that in the application of the penalties, the matter of minimum, medium, and maximum as a rule will not apply when the crime involved is culpable felony. The court has the discretion to determine which of the minimum, medium, or maximum penalty without necessarily applying the rules of divisibility and the proper period pursuant to Article 64, offsetting of mitigating and aggravating circumstances. The court may impose any penalty within the degree of a penalty. The court cannot be required to abide and apply a minimum, medium, or maximum. Not even the penalty next lower in degree. For instance, in the case of reckless imprudence resulting in homicide, the accused pleaded guilty and voluntarily surrendered. The court cannot be required or as a matter of right directed to apply a 1 degree lower because that Article 64 paragraph 5 and the application of mitigating circumstances does not apply as a rule to culpable felonies. Okay? Yes, sir. Now, dolo, the most important element, as I mentioned, is intent. Intent is the purpose. You know that. It is not an element of the crime. So that absent of an intent, absent of a mens rea, hindi ko mamemorya yung mahaba, nisit, what's that? Reum, etc. Mens, whatever is that? Mens rea. Nakita niyo yun, yung Latin maxim na yun? Sometimes that is one of the most difficult part of being a lawyer, to memorize so many provisions. But nonetheless, it does not matter if you cannot memorize as long as you can apply, you know, the principle that is better than memorizing because you memorize today, tomorrow you forget. You memorize today, you apply it, you do not know because simply you are dealing with verbally with the provision of the law. Okay. Lahat naman tayo rito makakalimutin di ba? When we are engrossed doing so many things, we simply forget. Sometimes some people here would forget that they are already married. Yes, kasama na ngayong asawa. Nakakalimutan pa nila. Kaya minsan naglalakad si mister. Hoy, mister, tingin ka ng tingin dyan. Nakalimutan mo na yata, nakasama mo ang asawa mo. Oh, kita mo. Somebody had an open zipper, nakalimutan isara. That is not a problem. Natural lang na paminsan-minsan nakakalimutan natin na isara ang ating zipper. Babae man o malalaki. The problem is when we forget to put down our zipper. Yun ang problema. That is the worst problem that you will have. Nakalimutan mo na ibaba ang iyong zipper. Alright. I'm just saying that this forgetfulness is just normal. Pero hindi naman Alzheimer yun na. It's different. So, intent is mens rea. Whatever is mens, whatever. Meaning, absence of intent. So that if there is no intent class, there is no crime committed. And as you will note, this is the basis of a justifying circumstance. Hence, if there is a justifying circumstance, there is no intent, there is no crime committed, there is no civil liability, because there will be no basis for the existence of the civil liability, unlike an exempting circumstance where what is lacking is, anong lacking sa exempting? Freedom or intelligence, but there is an intent that exists, and therefore there is a crime, there is an offender, and therefore if there is an offender, there is a civil liability, although the offender is exempt. These are two different concepts of your criminal law. In one case, sabi ng Supreme Court, there is no such thing as accidental self-defense. There's no such thing. Kasi they are anathema to each other, conflicting. One is justifying self-defense, one accident is exempting. There's no, it is either accident or self-defense. And one circumstance, siguro hindi ko na masyadong i-discuss yung nakakasawa na yung distinction ng intent at saka motive. Nakakasawa na yung i-discuss sa inyo. Ang intent is element, motive is not element. Motive is necessary only for purposes of determining the identification of the accused, determining the nature of the crime. Because when a crime is done in furtherance of rebellion, then the crime is only rebellion. Those crimes, common crimes, are absorbed. Diba? And then, just take note, class, that in crimes, when a person commits a crime, there is a presumption of intent. Presumption. However, class, in specific crimes, where the specific intent is required as an element, that must be alleged in the information to secure that offense in which that intent is an element. Example, intent to gain in robbery, intent to kill in murder or homicide. That must be alleged. Otherwise, you cannot secure a conviction of murder or homicide, but only to the extent of physical injuries. But what is important, class, for purposes of intent, is the principle of mistake of fact. Again, na naman tayo. Masyado naman tayo, sir. Alam na namin yan. Kilala nga namin yung US versus Achong. Kilala namin si Achong. But the principle behind the mistake of fact, class, is the absence of criminal intent because of a mistake or misapprehension of a fact. The principle behind it is the belief of the accused, honest belief of the accused. In criminal law, class, in determining the guilt of the accused, the belief of the accused at the time of the commission there must be taken into account. That is the principle behind the mistake of fact. The guilt of the accused must be viewed from his belief at the time of the commission of the crime. So that if his belief is that he is not committing a crime, then that must be taken into account in determining his liability. Mr. Achong believed that the person who was intruding inside his room was a bad person or a stranger, and despite the acts which he committed to determine the identity, that person who intruded did not identify himself. Basta na lang pumasok, binalibag yung pinto. Ano nangyari? Sinaksak siya. It turned out that victim is the roommate of Achong. So, even if there is no actual aggression against the accused, if the belief of the accused is there is a forthcoming aggression, just like a person playing a joke, pointed his finger behind the person, and that person believing that there is an aggression against him, when the finger of that victim was pointed at his back in a dark alley where there are several bad people under such circumstance. If that person playing a joke or making a joke is injured, there is mistake of fact, where the accused may be exonerated. Mistake of fact is not the same as a mistake of law. Why? Because mistake of law is not exempting, it does not exempt the offender from liability, because ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith. But ignorantia facti excusat. Ignorance of a fact will excuse. Ignorantia lehis neminem excusat. Ayan, memoryado natin yan of your civil code in relation to the mistake of fact. I remember this because in one case, the Supreme Court got married and then secured a divorce. Anong nangyari? After securing a divorce, he went back to the Philippines and got married the second time around. Charged for bigamy, he argued, there is a mistake of fact. I was of the honest belief that I could get married again because of the divorce which I have secured abroad. Alright. Therefore, I should be exonerated. The Supreme Court said, that is not a mistake of fact, but a mistake of law. And that will not exonerate you. The irony of which is the trial court judge acquitted the accused. What happened? The judge was sanctioned administratively for ignorance of the law. Do not follow that. So, mistake of fact is not the same as mistake of law. Remember, yung judgment ng accused, judgment of the belief of the accused. Even in self-defense, the honest belief of the accused that there is a forthcoming aggression should be taken into account in determining whether there is an aggression which is actual or imminent. The imminent aggression must be based upon his honest belief that his life is in peril. Yan ang pinaka-basis ng mistake of fact. Mistake of fact also is not the same as mistake in the identity of the victim. Because even if there is a mistake in the identity of the victim, as long as the accused committed a crime, although the act committed is different from what he intended, it falls under Article 4, Paragraph 1. Memorize Article 4, Paragraph 1. 90% probability it will come out in the bar exam. Noong panahon namin, sasabihin ng reviewer, if that article will not ask in the bar exam, find the highest tree and hang me there. I will not do that. Baka hindi na ako makapag-review next time. Alright. But I am just giving you the probabilities, and there is no it is possible that it will be asked again. The greater possibility that it will be asked again in the bar exam. So, in essence, class, Article 4, Paragraph 1 is simply a concept or principle of logic. Bakit principle of logic? Cause and effect. If there is a cause, there is necessarily an effect. And if this cause is the proximate cause of the effect, So long as it is the logical and necessary consequence, the accused is liable. Regardless of the predisposition of the victim, precondition of the victim, or circumstances that intervened from the cause and effect, so long as it is not an efficient intervening cause. Sir, ang dami nyo nang sinabi, hindi na namin naintindihan. Alright, isa-isahin natin. You know, this is not the time for the lecturer to confuse the students. By this time, hanggat maaari, spoon-feed na kayo. Di ba? Kasi, ang dami nyo nang pinag-aaralan eh. You have 8 subjects to contend with. And then, malabo pa ang lecture. Patay. Mabuti pa mag-aral na lang ako sa bahay. Marami pa akong matututunan kaysa umattend na dyan. Malabong lecture. Correct? Yes, sir. Kaya lang, sometimes I feel afraid if I saw some of you writing even the definition. Meron sometimes mayroong sinasabi kong definition ng a certain definition, word for word sinusulat pa yung definition. Wag na, i-check nyo na lang definition o ganun na lang, makikita nyo na yan sa libro. Anyway, we are in cause and effect, and as I have said, as a rule, when there is a cause, the accused is liable for the consequence of his act. Gusto niyo na mahabang principle? The cause of the cause is the cause of the evil cause. Oh, kita niyo? Yan ang meaning ng proximate cause. Even if there are intervening events, so long as it is not an efficient intervening cause. That is the definition of a proximate cause. Dapat nga memoryado nyo ang definition ng proximate cause. Mahaba yung definition. Nandyan sa libro ninyo. Proximate cause is a cause which in its continuous sequence without any efficient intervening cause would cause the injury, without which the injury would not have occurred. Yan, something ganyan kahaba. Pero simply stated, ayan, it is that cause without which the effect would not resolve. Oh, kita nyo. Alright. It is not affected by the predisposition of the victim. The accused committed a felony, robbery, and in the course of the robbery, the victim, out of fear, because the accused has a weapon, ran and jumped into the river, forgetting that he does not know how to swim. Died as a consequence. He drowned. Is the accused liable? The answer is yes. Because the predisposition of the victim was caused by the fear done by the accused. Rather, tumalon. Alright. The precondition of the accused, a victim, not accused, precondition. Nagpaputok, alarm and scandal. The victim died because of heart ailment. Precondition of the accused. Heart attack due to the firing of the gun. That is logical and necessary consequence. Contemporaneous circumstances. Dinala sa hospital yung victim. The doctor negligently treated the victim. Liable ang accused? The answer is yes. Because that is not an efficient intervening cause. It is a logical and necessary consequence that the victim will be treated by a doctor. And not all doctors are knowledgeable. So long as the doctor did not intentionally mistreated the victim, that is not considered an efficient intervening cause. Of course, it is self-explanatory. If the doctor mistreated intentionally, alam na niya na this person is has an allergy of a certain medicine, and still ginawa pa rin niya intentionally, sinaksakan pa rin niya ng ano ba yun, walang ng anesthesia, sinaksakan pa rin knowingly that the victim is allergy of such kind, then there is now an efficient intervening cause. No, intentionally. If it was negligently, only by fault, culpa, he is not liable because that is not an efficient intervening cause. Alright. Among the accepted or among the principles arising from Article 4, Paragraph 1 are error in persone, aberratio ictus, and praeter intentione. Sir, madali yan. Kayang-kaya na namin yan. Mistake of identity is governed under Article 49. If there is a mistake of identity, the accused will be penalized with the lesser offense in its maximum period. If there is a variance between the crime intended and the crime actually committed because of mistake of fact, Article 49 provides the lesser penalty in its maximum period. So, Pedro intended to commit homicide, to kill a certain person, but because of error in personae, it was his father who was killed. What is the crime committed? Of course, parricide. Itatay nga niya yung baril eh. But under Article 49 class, the penalty would be for the crime he intended to commit, which is homicide, but in its maximum period. On the contrary, if he intends to kill his father, but it was a friend who was killed, what is the proper charge? Very good. Homicide. Homicide. But the penalty will be imposed in its maximum period. That is the effect of error in persone or mistake in the identity. Unlike aberratio ictus, when there is a mistake in the law, the accused fired his gun, missing his target, another person was hit. If there is only one single act, sir, redundant kayo, mali kayo, one single is superfluous. Tama nga no, one lang or single will be enough. But I am just stressing a certain point. That is why I made it redundantly for you to remember. I did that purposely. Sometimes I also exaggerate so that you will not forget. Okay. One single act under Article 48. It will constitute a complex crime. And then you have this praeter-intentionem, lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong. Sir, lack of intent to commit is something which is internal. How can we determine that the accused indeed did not intend to commit so grave a wrong? We cannot read his mind. That is correct. To determine whether there was lack of intent, you simply consider the overt act or the act that was committed by the accused vis-a-vis the resulting crime or injury. So that if there is a disparity between the act committed and the resulting injury, then we may conclude there is lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong. Example, a kick blow that resulted in the death of the victim. A mere kick blow would not show that there is an intent to kill. A mere fist blow, ordinarily, unless you are Manny Pacquiao or Marquez, will not cause the death of a person. But if it will cause death, then we can say there is lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong. This is a mitigating circumstance class which apply only when there is a bodily injury, bodily harm applicable. Flores, people versus Flores. The victim was drunk, heavily drunk, or dead drunk, ika nga. And what does a person do when he is dead drunk? Wala na, hihiga na lang yan, hihilata. And true enough, this person dead drunk lied on the pavement with flowing waters coming from the canal because it is cool and refreshing. You know, if you are drunk, hindi ba, you find a place which is very cool and refreshing so that you can sleep very well. Ganun ang nangyari. Doon natulog sa kanal. And his enemy saw this person drunk, kick him several times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kick blows were inflicted and immediately the accused ran away. The victim was brought to the hospital but did not survive and died as a consequence. Bakit namatay? Apparently, medical legal report, yung kanyang autopsy showed that the spleen of the victim was hit by the kick blows and had an internal hemorrhage. Alright. What is the crime committed? Here, there was no intent to kill. But because the victim died, intent to kill is always presumed. Crime committed, the Supreme Court said, murder. Why murder? Because there was treachery. When the victim was kicked, he was dead drunk, he cannot afford any opportunity to defend himself. But, said the Supreme Court, considering the manner how the injury was inflicted, a mere kick blow will not cause the death of the victim as normally it will not cause the death. The accused is entitled to a mitigating circumstance of lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong. Sir, supposing there was a weapon that is used in the infliction of an injury, there is a firearm that was fired, may lack of intent still be appreciated, considering that the firing of a gun would necessarily bring about the death of a person? The answer is yes, it may still be appreciated. Because it is not only the manner how the crime was committed, it is not only the weapon that is used which is considered, but both circumstances may be considered to determine whether there is lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong. This is exemplified in one case class where the spouse, babae, ano yun? Nager. Every time the husband would come home early in the morning, the wife would nag. Huwag kayo kanyan. Si Mr. Mabait, nagtatrabaho hanggang umaga, pinapagalitan niyo pa. So, the husband, arriving very early in the morning, was nagged by the wife, shouting. The husband got irked and wanted to pacify. Nakakahiya sa kapitbahay. The neighborhood is disturbed by the shouting of the wife. So, the husband took off his firearm para naman just to scare and pacify, baka naman matakot. So, ilabas ang baril. He put out his gun. But the wife was not pacified. Instead, he grabbed the gun. And in the course of the grappling for the possession of the gun went off. Boom! The wife was killed. The husband brought her to the hospital, DOA, dead on arrival. Alright. He was charged with parricide. Very good. Is he liable? Yes. Because he was committing a felony, although the wrongful act done is different from what he intended. He intended to scare, great threats, but it caused the death. As a result, the Supreme Court said the accused is guilty of parricide, but with the mitigating circumstance of lack of intent to commit so grave a wrong, because the manner how the victim was killed shows that he did not intend to kill the victim. Okay? Those are just some of the cases reflective of the effects of Article 4, Paragraph 1. Again, I will remind you, Article 4, Paragraph 1 is a very fertile source of a bar exam question. Parang reproductive bill, RH law. Alright. Siguro naman yung nandito, I saw again, I don't like to see this. May nakita ako ng impossible crime. This is paragraph 2 of Article 4. Don't forget, in Todd versus Court of Appeals, it is still the controlling jurisprudence because it exemplified a factual impossibility, which is defined also as a physical impossibility based upon the belief of the accused. based upon the belief of, kaya nga factual. Believing that the person inside the house, the victim is inside the house, the accused fired upon the victim, but it turned out wala naman pala. Alright. That is a case of an impossible crime. In one recent case, People versus Jacinto, regarding the theft that was committed involving a check that has a closed account and therefore has no value. The Supreme Court said it is an impossible crime. Factual impossibility. Yung pala closed account na ininakaw na check right na in cash, wala palang laman. Okay. In addition to that, class, take note that whenever there is another crime committed, it is the other crime which is the basis of the penalty. So, if there is robbery and the victim has no money, the force or intimidation employed in the course of the robbery amounting to grave threats should be the conviction. Grave threats and not impossible crime of robbery. Do you follow? Okay. It's not an impossible crime because there is another crime. Sir, bakit sa Intod binagbabaril yung bahay? Wala yung victim. Meron na sirang bahay. Malicious. Mischief. Bakit ang Supreme Court hindi kinumbik si Intod ng malicious mischief? Following the principle that if there is another crime committed, then it is the other crime which should be the conviction of the accused. Tama? Tama! Tama. But in that case of Intod, there was no proof or evidence. It was not presented during the trial that there is such other crime committed. Because if it were otherwise, then there should have been a different ruling. Okay? There should have been a different ruling. Article 6 must be memorized. Article 6 must be memorized. Let me give you a short anatomy of a criminal offense. Sir, criminal law tayo, hindi tayo science. Why do we need to know the anatomy? But I am making an anatomy of a criminal offense. And for this purpose, join me in being a criminal offender. Let us pause for a moment and imagine that we are also criminal offenders. Naalala ko tuloy one time, may nag-introduce sa akin. Somebody introduced me. Sabi niya, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you my criminal professor, Justice Lopez. Na-miss yung criminal law professor, you see. Hindi niya na alam. Apparently, he was not exempt out of his mind. Nawala yung law, imagine that. And it completely changed the meaning. My criminal professor, Justice Lopez. I went out of the room convicted of a crime. So if we want to commit a crime, we first, what is the first thing that we do? We make a preparation. Bili tayo ng baril, kukuha tayo ng pambomba, kukuha tayo ng poison, bibili tayo ng implements. That is a preparatory act. Correct? If there was already a preparatory act, is this a crime? Not yet. Hindi pa crime yan. Kidnapping with kidnapping. It's plain and simple. Binayaran si Pedro to kidnap a certain person. On his way to kidnap the victim, nahuli. Is there a crime? Wala. Wala pang acts of execution. Ayan. After the preparatory acts, you perform the acts of execution. Preparatory act is not punishable. Acts of execution, punishable. Sir, how do we know that the act performed is a mere preparatory act and it is not an act of execution? Because when we are doing a preparatory act, we are not liable. Okay. How do we know? The demarcation is the overt act. What is an overt act? It is that act that commences the commission of the acts of execution. Direct relationship between the act intended and the act actually committed. Relationship between the act committed in the intent of the accused is the overt act. Kasi, if the accused simply went on top of the victim, woman, is there attempted rape? The accused simply pointed his gun, is there attempted homicide? Wala pa. Because mere pointing a gun is not directly related to homicide. Mere going on top of a woman is not directly related to the act of penetration, which is the overt act that is involved in crimes of rape. There must be a clear showing that there is intent to penetrate. People versus Lamahang is very illustrative. You recall Lamahang, pumapasok pa lang sa bahay, sinisira yung pinto when he was apprehended. He cannot be charged with attempted robbery because the overt act of robbery is the taking of the property. Not until he took the property that there is an overt act. Here, there may be another crime committed. As when the accused pointed his gun or when the accused went on top the woman. It may be acts of lasciviousness, grave threat, or attempted trespass to dwelling. But once he took off the clothes of the woman, took also his Victoria's Secret. May Victoria's Secret ba lalaki? Okay. Nabaliktad ko lang. Dapat sa babae ko na-apply ang Victoria's Secret. Anyway, when the man also took off his underwear, and then went on top of the woman, that is a clear manifestation of intent to penetrate. Pero kung nakakansorsilyo pa at nakapakon naman, that doubt should be resolved in favor of the accused. When the accused pointed his gun, that is not the overt act of murder or homicide. There must be the pulling of the trigger. Because if there is no act that may or may not cause an injury, there is an overt act of homicide or murder. In homicide or murder class, the extent of the injury will determine whether it is attempted or prostrated. Attempted if there is no fatal injury, prostrated when there is a mortal wound inflicted. Alright. So, preparatory act is not punishable except, sabi sir, gulo nyo, except when there is a law penalizing the same. articulate, conspiracy, proposal are preparatory acts which are not punishable, yet they are punishable because there is a law penalizing the same. Conspiracy and proposal to commit terrorism. 8294 ba ang terrorism? 8294 Republic Act? O whatever. Basta, terrorism proposal. As a rule, if there was a preparatory act, dapat hindi yan punishable. But if there is a law ngayon, there is such thing as a provision, then it is good. Conspiracy to sell, conspiracy to manufacture, conspiracy to import drugs is also a preparatory act, yet it is punishable. Alright? Now, when the accused commences this act by overt act, I want you to memorize, because without the overt act, mali ang sagot ninyo. Without the word overt act defining an attempted felony, mali ang sagot ninyo. Sige, tell me how we would answer the question in the back. If the question involves an attempted felony. Mali. When the accused commences the act by ang ipapalit niya sa overt act? Wala. Alright. At the time the accused is performing the acts of execution, and when he still have control of himself, that is the so-called subjective stage of the felony. But once he had performed all acts of execution, he had reached the objective stage of the felony. And that objective stage may either be frustrated or consummated violation. Objective, when the accused perform all acts of execution. And this objective stage may either be frustrated or consummated. If the accused did not continue to commit the crime and withdraw, tantamount to desistance. He desisted during this subjective stage. If he desisted, that is a absolutory cause that would exempt the offender from liability. Spontaneous desistance. If the desistance occurred during this stage, it is no longer an absolutory cause. So, if the accused had taken the property, left the premises, changed his mind, returned the property, there is no absolutory cause because he had already achieved or attained the objective stage. There is no more absolutory cause. From your definition class, you will reflect this description or anatomy. Attempted felony, when the accused commences the commission of acts of execution directly by overt act, but does not perform all acts of execution by reason of some cause or accident other than his spontaneous desistance. But if the accused had already performed all acts of execution but does not accomplish the crime, then it is frustrated or consummated, dependent whether or not he had achieved his objective. It is the subjective, objective stage. So you can easily distinguish frustrated from an attempted violation. Alright. I hope you understood my anatomy of a criminal offense applying Article 6. These provisions under Article 6 is not a calibrated standard to apply in all crimes. This is modified by the manner how the crime is committed, the element of the crime, as well as the nature of the crime. Manner of committing the crime, modifying the rules under Article 6 is exemplified by a formal crime like rape, theft, bribery. Bakit? Manner in rape, the mere touching of the organ consummates the crime. There is no in between touching and non-touching. Hence, there is only attempted and consummated. There is no prostrated violation of rape. In like manner, taking of the property, theft, robbery, the mere fact that the accused already is in possession consummates the crime. There is no in between. Diba? Manner. Element of the crime. Staffa. Without the damage, element of damage, it can never be consummated. Kailangan may damage. Kung walang damage, it may be attempted or proceeded dependent upon the extent of the acts of execution. Nature of the crime. There are crimes because of their nature are always consummated. Rebellion, treason. There is no such thing as attempted and frustrated rebellion. Because if the rebellion prospered, the rebels will not prosecute themselves. If Nonasan and company were able to overthrow the government, Kodeta were able to succeed, who will prosecute them? Because of their nature. Physical injury, because of its nature, it is consummated the moment it is inflicted. Dependent upon the injury inflicted, serious, less serious, or slight. Flight to enemy country, the mere fact that he intended to leave the country, he was apprehended, consummated. We did not wait for him to reach the other country because it might not be possible anymore to bring him back to the Philippine territory. Alright, let's take the much needed break. Alam ko, by your looks, namumutla na ang iba sa inyo at maybe di na naintindihan dahil sa gutom. At in what time are we going to resume?